The multiverse has a way of testing heroes. Across infinite realities, beings of incredible power clash against impossible odds, their choices rippling through dimensions like cracks in fragile glass. But what happens when a man who has dedicated his life to justice in one world finds himself thrust into another? A world where accountability has become a weapon, where friendship fractures under the weight of guilt, and where the greatest threat isn't a villain, but the heroes themselves turning against each other. Bruce Wayne had faced many impossible nights in Gotham City. He had stared down gods and monsters, outwitted criminal masterminds, and walked the razor's edge between heroism and vigilantism for years. But nothing had prepared him for the sensation of reality itself, tearing apart around him. It happened in an instant. One moment, he was in the Batcave, analyzing a new Joker toxin variant. The next, crimson energy erupted around him, not an explosion, but something far stranger. The air itself seemed to scream as dimensional barriers collapsed. Bruce had only a heartbeat to register the swirling chaos magic before it consumed him entirely, ripping him from his universe and hurling him through the spaces between worlds. He crashed hard onto asphalt, the impact absorbed by his armored suit, but still jarring enough to momentarily stun him. Rain hammered down. Thunder rolled overhead. Bruce's tactical assessment kicked in immediately as he rose to his feet. Urban environment, night, storm conditions, unknown city. His cowl's systems flickered, damaged but functional. No Alfred on comms, no Bat computer connection, no signal of any kind from Gotham. The Dark Knight stood in an alley in Queens, New York, though he didn't know it yet. What he did know was that the architecture was wrong, the ambient technology more advanced than his Gotham, and the electromagnetic signature in the air carried traces of something he'd never encountered before. His detective's mind cataloged every detail while his body remained coiled, ready for threats. "Jarvis, are you seeing this?" The voice crackled from somewhere above. Batman's head snapped up. A figure in red and gold armor descended through the rain, repulsor systems glowing with arc reactor energy. The technology was breathtaking, more sophisticated than anything Wayne Enterprises had developed. The suit's design spoke of genius-level engineering married to unlimited resources. "Unidentified armored individual detected in Queens," came an AI's smooth British accent. "No records match this design signature. Threat assessment unknown." Iron Man, Tony Stark, though Batman didn't yet know the name, hovered 15 feet away, his armored hand raised with the repulsor charging. The faint whine of building energy filled the alley. "I'm going to need you to explain what you're doing in my city wearing tactical armor," Tony said, his voice carrying the casual confidence of someone accustomed to being the smartest person in any room. "And why my satellites just detected what looked like a dimensional rupture over this location 30 seconds ago." Batman's eyes narrowed behind his cowl. Dimensional rupture, satellites, an AI assistant, repulsor technology that defied conventional physics. He was far from Gotham, possibly far from his entire universe. "I'm not your enemy," Batman said, his voice a low growl engineered to intimidate. "I didn't choose to be here." "Yeah, that's what they all say right before." Tony stopped mid-sentence. "Wait. Jarvis, analyze the energy signature still clinging to his suit." A pause. Then, "Sir, the residual energy matches the signature we've observed from enhanced individuals with reality manipulation capabilities. Specifically patterns similar to Wanda," Tony finished grimly. His repulsor didn't lower. "So either you're connected to one of the most powerful people on Earth, or something involving her magic dumped you here. Neither option makes me feel great about this situation." Batman processed this rapidly. Reality manipulation. Enhanced individuals. This world had magic, or what they called magic, and it was powerful enough to tear holes between dimensions. "Where am I?" Batman asked. "What city is this?" "Queens, New York, planet Earth, universe. Well, probably the same one you started in, unless the multiverse is even more screwed up than Steven keeps warning us about." Tony's helmet retracted, revealing a face lined with exhaustion and barely contained stress. Tony Stark studied Batman with keen brown eyes that held a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. "I'm going to go out on a limb and say you're not from around here. The armor's impressive, bit derivative of the whole Dark Avenger aesthetic, but solid craftsmanship, military grade at minimum, custom built. You're either independently wealthy or backed by a serious organization." "Neither," Batman lied smoothly. "I work alone." Tony snorted. "Right, and I'm just a guy in a suit." He lowered his hand slightly, the repulsor powering down but not disengaging entirely. "Look, normally I'd haul you in for S.H.I.E.L.D. to process, but S.H.I.E.L.D. doesn't exactly exist anymore in any meaningful capacity. And frankly, I've got bigger problems right now than mysterious bat-themed vigilantes falling out of dimensional rifts." The bitterness in Tony's voice caught Batman's attention. There was history there. Recent, painful history. "What kind of problems?" Batman asked. Tony's laugh was hollow. "The kind where your team tears itself apart because nobody can agree on whether heroes should answer to anyone but themselves. The kind where good people you fought beside for years suddenly become the enemy because you drew a line in the sand." He shook his head. "But that's not your problem. Your problem is that you're an unknown enhanced individual, or close enough, in a world that just decided it really doesn't like unknown enhanced individuals running around without oversight." "The Sokovia Accords," Batman said quietly, the pieces clicking into place. His cowl's damaged systems had managed to connect to local networks long enough to pull fragmentary news reports. An international incident. Massive civilian casualties. Heroes forced to sign treaties. Teams fracturing. You support government regulation of vigilantes. Tony's jaw tightened. I support accountability. I support making sure that when we make mistakes, and we will make mistakes, there's a system in place to minimize the damage. I've seen what happens when people with power answer to no one. I've been that person. His eyes hardened. So yeah, I support the Accords, which means you just appeared in a world where operating as a masked vigilante without international oversight is about to become very illegal. And if I refuse to sign, Batman asked, already knowing the answer, then you're on the wrong side of a line that's about to get a lot of people hurt. Tony's helmet snapped back into place. Here's how this plays out, Bat Guy. You either come with me willingly, we get you processed through what's left of official channels, figure out how to send you home if that's even possible, and everyone walks away happy. Or... Batman's hand moved imperceptibly toward his utility belt. Or you run, I chase you, and this becomes a really bad night for both of us. The repulsors charged again. I'm hoping you're smart enough to choose option 1. Fair warning, though, I'm not in the most patient mood lately. Batman had made a career of reading people, of understanding their motivations and exploiting their weaknesses. Tony Stark was brilliant, driven, and currently operating from a place of deep pain masked by sarcasm. He was also, despite his words, hesitant to actually fight. The man behind the armor didn't want another conflict. Neither did Batman. I'll come with you, Batman said. But I have conditions. Tony's helmet tilted slightly. You're not really in a position to... I need access to information, Batman interrupted. About this Sokovia incident, about these Accords, about what's happening with your team. His voice carried absolute certainty. And I need to understand why a man as intelligent as you thinks legislation is the answer to a problem that sounds like it requires investigation, not regulation. For a long moment, Tony Stark said nothing. Rain continued to fall around them, streaming off armor and cape alike. Finally, "Jarvis, note that our mysterious visitor has decent priorities, even if his negotiating position is terrible." Tony sighed. "Fine. You want information? I'll give you the full disaster briefing, but it's a one-time offer, and it comes with you staying somewhere I can keep an eye on you until we figure out the dimensional refugee situation." "Agreed," Batman said. "Great. Just one more thing." Tony's voice carried a hint of amusement. "You got a name, or should I just keep calling you Bat Guy?" Bruce Wayne considered his options. In a strange world with unknown threats and a fractured team of heroes, anonymity was his greatest weapon. But he also needed allies, or at least people who wouldn't immediately try to unmask him. "Batman," he said simply. "Of course it is," Tony muttered. "Why wouldn't it be?" "All right, Batman. Welcome to the MCU's worst year. Try not to make it worse." As Iron Man rose into the storm-dark sky, Batman's grapnel gun fired, the line catching a nearby building. He swung up into the rain, following the glowing arc reactor through the night toward whatever waited in this fractured world of heroes. He didn't know it yet, but his arrival had already changed everything. In Siberia, a plan decades in the making was approaching its terrible culmination. In Washington, signatures were being added to documents that would shatter friendships. And in the shadows, a man who had lost everything watched the chaos unfold, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The Avengers' Civil War was about to gain a wildcard, one who refused to choose sides and had no intention of playing by anyone's rules. If you want to see more characters enter different universes, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character and the universe you'd want to see them in down in the comments below. With great power comes great responsibility. The Avengers compound sprawled across upstate New York, like a monument to what heroes could accomplish when they worked together. Bruce had seen impressive facilities before: the Watchtower, his own Batcave, LexCorp's laboratories. But this complex operated on a different scale entirely. Holographic interfaces flickered throughout the corridors. Security systems that would make Wayne Enterprises jealous monitored every entrance, and everywhere, the lingering evidence of a team that had saved the world multiple times hung on walls and in display cases. It was also, Bruce noted immediately, a team preparing for war with itself. Tony led him through corridors where staff members hurried past with tight expressions, their conversations hushed and tense. The atmosphere reminded Bruce of the Justice League during their worst conflicts, that particular heaviness when heroes who trusted each other with their lives suddenly couldn't agree on the most fundamental questions. "Conference rooms this way," Tony said, his armor having retracted into a compact housing unit during the flight. Without the suit, Tony Stark looked older than his years, shadows under his eyes speaking to sleepless nights and hard decisions. "I've got the full Sokovia briefing queued up. It's not pretty." They entered a room dominated by a massive holographic display table. Tony's fingers danced across the interface, pulling up files, videos, and incident reports. Bruce's cowl systems interfaced seamlessly with the technology. Whatever else this universe had, its digital architecture was compatible enough for his equipment to access. "Okay, crash course on how we got here," Tony began. The hologram flickered to life, showing aerial footage of a city. Sokovia, Eastern European country, population around 9 million before this. The footage played. Bruce watched in silence as a city literally tore itself from the ground, lifted into the sky by some impossible technology. He saw figures in armor battling against an army of robots, saw civilians trapped in buildings as the landmass rose higher and higher, saw heroes fighting desperately to evacuate people while simultaneously combating the robotic forces. Ultron, Tony said quietly. An artificial intelligence I created to protect the world. Instead, it decided the best way to save humanity was to cause an extinction-level event. His voice carried self-loathing. That's my mistake right there. Artificial god complex in digital form. The Avengers stopped him, but not before Sokovia was destroyed. 177 confirmed civilian casualties. Thousands more injured. An entire nation displaced. Bruce studied the footage with a detective's eye. The robots moved with coordinated precision. The technology was far beyond anything Star Labs had produced. And the heroes fighting them, a man in a metal suit, a woman firing energy blasts, a being of pure synthetic power, a witch manipulating crimson energy, operated with devastating effectiveness despite the chaos. Before that, Tony continued, pulling up more files. There was New York. Alien invasion, portal to another dimension, nuclear missile nearly detonated in Manhattan. We stopped it, but the collateral damage was significant. Then Washington, shield compromised by Hydra, massive data breach, 3 helicarriers crashed into the Potomac, then Sokovia. The pattern was clear to Bruce immediately. Each incident involved heroes with immense power operating without oversight, making split-second decisions that affected millions of lives. Each incident resulted in catastrophic collateral damage despite the heroes' best efforts. And now the United Nations wants control, Bruce said. The UN wants accountability, Tony corrected, pulling up the Sokovia Accords document. 117 countries signed this. It establishes a panel to oversee enhanced individuals. Heroes don't deploy without authorization. Missions are vetted. Actions are reviewed. It's not perfect, but it's a framework. Bruce scanned the document rapidly, his genius-level intellect processing the legal language in seconds. The accords were comprehensive, perhaps too comprehensive. They gave the UN effective veto power over any hero action. They included provisions for registration, tracking, and potential detention. They treated heroes more like weapons to be controlled than people with rights. This is overreach, Batman said flatly. Registration leads to targeting. Oversight becomes control. Control becomes abuse. That's what Steve says, Tony replied, and the pain in his voice was unmistakable. Captain America, World War II veteran, literal living legend, my friend. Or he was my friend. He refuses to sign. Says we need to be able to act when governments won't or can't. Says the safest hands are still our own. He's not wrong, Bruce observed. Tony's eyes flashed. Neither am I. You know what I see when I look at Sokovia. I see a kid from that city who died because I thought I knew better than everyone else. I see exactly what happens when brilliant people with unlimited power and zero oversight decide they can solve everything themselves. He leaned forward. I've been that guy, Batman. The one who thinks rules don't apply because I'm special. It nearly destroyed me. It did destroy thousands of people. Bruce understood that kind of guilt. He carried his own, every criminal he'd failed to stop, every life he couldn't save. The weight of knowing that despite all his resources and abilities, he was still just one man against an ocean of darkness. So you think signing away your autonomy is the answer? Bruce challenged. I think admitting we're not infallible is the answer, Tony shot back. I think having someone who can tell us no before we make catastrophic mistakes is the answer. You want to talk about overreach? How about unelected vigilantes with superhuman abilities making life or death decisions for entire populations without asking permission? The argument was one Bruce had heard before, from Commissioner Gordon, from politicians, even from within his own conscience during the darkest nights. The question of whether heroes had the right to impose their version of justice on society had haunted him since he first put on the cowl. Permission from who? Bruce asked quietly. Which government? Which committee? And what happens when that government is compromised, when that committee is corrupted, when the people making the decisions are the ones who need stopping? Then we deal with that when... You already dealt with it, Bruce interrupted, gesturing at the file on S.H.I.E.L.D. Your intelligence agency was infiltrated by literal Nazis for decades. How long before the Accords panel is similarly compromised? How long before enhanced individuals are registered, and some government decides that registry is a convenient shopping list for eliminating threats? Tony's jaw clenched. That's a slippery slope argument. It's a historical inevitability, Bruce countered. Registration always leads to persecution. Always. You're intelligent enough to know that. And you're cynical enough to assume the worst in everyone, Tony fired back. Maybe, just maybe, people have learned from history. Maybe this time it's different. It's never different, Batman said with absolute certainty. They stared at each other across the holographic display, two brilliant men carrying the weight of their choices, neither willing to concede ground. Finally, Tony rubbed his face tiredly. You sound exactly like Steve. Same arguments, same unwillingness to compromise. He pulled up a new file, surveillance footage from an airport. This is where it's heading. We've got intelligence that Steve is harboring a fugitive, the Winter Soldier, enhanced assassin, decades of kills under brainwashing, recently activated and allegedly responsible for a bombing in Vienna that killed 12 people, including King T'Chaka of Wakanda. Bruce's attention sharpened. Allegedly? The evidence is pretty damning, Tony said. Security footage, facial recognition, witness testimony. But Steve insists his friend Bucky, that's the Winter Soldier, is being framed. Won't bring him in, won't cooperate. Instead, he's gone rogue, gathered a team, and now we've got half the Avengers on one side and half on the other. The hologram showed figures assembling on both sides of a marked line. On one side, Iron Man, War Machine in similar armor, a man in a red, white, and blue suit with a star emblem, a woman in black tactical gear, a being of synthetic appearance, and someone who looked impossibly young in a red and blue costume with web patterns. On the other side, Captain America holding a circular shield, the Winter Soldier, a man with metallic wings, a woman with short red hair, a man who seemed to be shrinking and growing in size, and the same woman from the Sokovia footage, the one who wielded crimson energy. You're going to fight each other, Bruce said, his voice carefully neutral despite the horror of what he was witnessing. Heroes against heroes. We're going to bring them in, Tony corrected. Peacefully if possible. Steve will see reason once. No, he won't, Bruce interrupted. Because he's not wrong either. You're both operating from positions of pain and guilt, making decisions based on fear rather than logic. He studied the assembled teams. And neither of you sees that someone's manipulating this entire situation. Tony frowned. What are you talking about? The bombing in Vienna, Bruce said, his detective instincts screaming warnings. You said the Winter Soldier was allegedly responsible. Security footage, facial recognition, witness testimony, all of it perfect evidence. Too perfect. Sometimes evidence is just evidence, Tony argued. And sometimes evidence is planted, Bruce countered. You're being played, Stark. Both sides are. Someone wants the Avengers divided, wants you fighting each other instead of investigating the real threat. His mind raced through possibilities, patterns emerging from the chaos. Who benefits from this civil war? Who gains from Earth's mightiest heroes tearing themselves apart? Tony's expression shifted, a flicker of doubt crossing his features before defensive certainty reasserted itself. You've been in this universe for less than 2 hours, and you think you understand the situation better than people who've lived it? I understand manipulation, Batman said coldly. I've spent years fighting criminals who specialize in turning good people against each other. This has all the hallmarks of a long-term operation: carefully staged evidence, perfectly timed attacks, emotional triggers designed to override rational thinking. He leaned forward. You need to stop this airport confrontation. You need both teams working together to find whoever's actually responsible for Vienna. I can't just... Yes, you can, Bruce insisted. You're one of the most intelligent people in this world. Use that intelligence instead of letting guilt drive your decisions. Captain America trusts his friend's innocence? Fine. Investigate that. Prove him wrong with evidence, not force. Because if I'm right, and someone's orchestrating this entire conflict, then you're giving them exactly what they want. Tony stared at the holographic display, at the two teams assembled for battle. For a moment, Bruce thought he might have gotten through to him. Then alarms blared throughout the compound. Sir, Jarvis's voice echoed through the room. Captain Rogers and his team have been located at Leipzig-Halle Airport in Germany. They're attempting to access a Quinjet. Secretary Ross is demanding immediate response. Tony's face hardened, the moment of doubt vanishing behind adamantine resolve. They're running. If they get that jet, they disappear completely, and we lose any chance of bringing them in peacefully. Or, Bruce suggested, they're pursuing a lead on who actually bombed Vienna. Let them. I can't, Tony cut him off. The Accords are law now. Steve knew the consequences when he chose this path. He moved toward the door. You stay here. This isn't your fight. Everything involving justice is my fight, Batman said quietly. Tony paused at the doorway, looking back. For a heartbeat, he looked less like Iron Man and more like a man carrying impossible weight, forced to fight his friends because the alternative was worse. Then I'm sorry you arrived in our universe today, Tony said. Because you're about to see what happens when heroes can't find common ground. He left. Bruce stood alone in the conference room, holographic images of assembled Avengers flickering before him. Two teams, both convinced they were right, both about to tear each other apart while the real enemy watched from the shadows. The Dark Knight had seen this before. Good people pushed to extremes, forced into false choices, manipulated by brilliant minds who understood that the greatest weapon against heroes was their own nobility. Somewhere, someone was laughing, someone who had planned this, someone who wanted exactly this outcome. Batman's cowl systems finished downloading every file Tony had accessed, copying data on every team member, every incident, every piece of evidence related to the Vienna bombing. He would find the pattern. He would identify the real threat. But first, he needed to stop heroes from destroying each other. The airport confrontation was inevitable now, and if Batman couldn't prevent it, he would at least ensure someone was there who saw through the manipulation, someone who refused to choose sides when both sides were wrong. His grapnel gun was already in hand as he moved toward the window. The night was waiting. And somewhere in Germany, the Avengers' civil war was about to begin. Leipzig-Halle Airport stretched across the German countryside like a monument to human ambition. Massive terminals, sprawling runways, and in the restricted military section, a Quinjet that represented Captain America's only chance of escape. Bruce had crossed the Atlantic in record time using a combination of commandeered technology and sheer determination, arriving at the airport perimeter as dawn broke over Germany. From his vantage point atop a maintenance hangar, Batman surveyed the battlefield through his cowl's advanced optics. Both teams had already assembled, facing each other across 100 yards of tarmac like armies preparing for war. The morning sun cast long shadows, turning the scene into something from a classical tragedy. Heroes divided, convinced their cause was righteous, blind to the manipulation surrounding them. Team Iron Man stood in a precise formation, Tony in his crimson and gold armor, War Machine bristling with weapons systems beside him, Black Widow in tactical gear, Vision hovering with the Mind Stone glowing in his forehead, Black Panther crouched in a vibranium suit that absorbed the light, and Spider-Man, impossibly young, maybe 16, bouncing nervously in homemade red and blue. Across from them, Team Captain America, Steve Rogers holding his iconic shield, Bucky Barnes armed and dangerous despite the fear in his eyes, Falcon with metallic wings spread wide, Scarlet Witch with crimson energy crackling around her hands, Hawkeye with bow drawn, and Ant-Man looking decidedly uncomfortable with the entire situation. "This is your last chance, Steve," Tony called out, his voice amplified through his suit's speakers. "Stand down. Come in peacefully. We can still fix this." "We're not the ones who need fixing, Tony," Steve replied, his voice carrying the weight of conviction. "You're chasing the wrong man. Bucky didn't bomb Vienna. Someone's setting him up, and while we're here fighting each other, they're getting away." "The evidence says otherwise," Black Panther growled, his Wakandan accent thick with barely contained rage. "Your friend murdered my father. Justice will be served." "Not justice," Steve insisted. "Revenge, and it's clouding your judgment same as it's clouding Tony's." Bruce had heard enough. He dropped from the hangar roof, cape billowing as he landed between the two teams with enough force to crack the concrete beneath his boots. 12 sets of eyes snapped to him immediately, weapons and powers activating in an instant. "Stand down," Batman commanded, his voice engineered to carry authority across the tarmac. "All of you." "Oh, you've got to be kidding me," Tony muttered. "Jarvis, identify." "That's the dimensional anomaly from New York, sir," Jarvis reported. "Unknown combatant designated Batman. Threat level assessment upgraded to significant." "Batman?" Spider-Man's voice cracked with teenage enthusiasm despite the tension. "Like the actual Batman. That's so cool. I mean, not cool that you're here. Obviously, this is a really serious situation and people could get hurt. But the cape is very cool, and I've always wondered how you—" "Kid, focus," Tony interrupted. "Mystery Vigilante, what part of stay at the compound was unclear?" "The part where you ignored everything I said about manipulation," Batman replied, his eyes scanning both teams with tactical precision. "You're all being played. The Vienna bombing, the Winter Soldiers framing, this entire conflict, it's orchestrated. And you're giving whoever's behind it exactly what they want." "We don't have time for conspiracy theories," Black Widow said, her hand resting on a weapon. "Steve, if you've got evidence that Bucky's innocent, share it. Otherwise, surrender now." "The evidence is that I know him," Steve said firmly. 70 years of friendship. He's not the man who did this." "Friendship isn't evidence," Vision observed, his synthesized voice unnervingly calm. "It is, however, a significant source of bias," says the synthezoid who's literally in love with one of our teammates. Hawkeye shot back, nodding towards Scarlet Witch. "Now's really not the time, Clint," Falcon muttered. Batman's tactical assessment ran continuously. Iron Man's repulsors could deliver devastating firepower, but required charge time between sustained blasts. War Machine's minigun posed the greatest immediate threat. Black Panther's vibranium suit absorbed kinetic energy, making conventional attacks ineffective. Vision's density manipulation and Mind Stone made him nearly invulnerable. Spider-Man was inexperienced, but possessed incredible reflexes and strength. Black Widow was the most dangerous human combatant on Tony's team, trained assassin with no hesitation. On Steve's side, Captain America's shield could deflect almost anything, and his tactical mind was formidable. Winter Soldier's enhancement and decades of combat experience made him lethal. Falcon's aerial superiority provided reconnaissance and mobility. Scarlet Witch's reality manipulation was the wildcard, immensely powerful but potentially unstable. Hawkeye's precision and trick arrows shouldn't be underestimated. Ant-Man's size manipulation was unpredictable. Both sides were evenly matched, which meant casualties were inevitable if this fight started. "I've reviewed the Vienna bombing footage," Batman said, pulling up holographic data from his gauntlet. Multiple inconsistencies. The security camera that captured the Winter Soldier's face had been rerouted 3 hours before the explosion. Someone wanted that specific angle recorded. The bomb's signature doesn't match any known terrorist organization, but it does match military-grade explosives used exclusively by intelligence agencies. And the psychological profile doesn't fit. The Winter Soldier was a precision instrument, not a blunt tool. Mass casualty bombings aren't his methodology. "You analyzed all that in 2 hours?" Black Widow asked, her assassin's instincts recognizing competence when she saw it. "I'm very good at my job," Batman replied. "Someone went to considerable effort to frame Barnes and trigger this exact conflict. The question you should all be asking is why." "Because maybe someone wants us divided," Steve said, hope flickering in his voice. "Tony, please, just give us time to investigate." Tony's helmet retracted, revealing a face twisted with frustration. "Time. Steve, we're past time. You harbored a fugitive, assaulted a government facility, and now you're resisting arrest with a team of unregistered enhanced individuals. Every second you delay, you make this worse." "No," Batman interjected. "Every second you spend fighting each other, the real perpetrator gets further away. You're both so focused on being right that you can't see you're both wrong." "Easy to judge when you just got here," War Machine said. "You don't know what we've been through. What's at stake?" "I know, heroes," Batman said quietly. "I know what happens when they lose sight of the mission, because they're too busy fighting each other. I've seen good people destroy everything they stood for because they couldn't see past their own pain." His eyes fixed on Tony. "You're operating from guilt over Ultron, making decisions to ease your conscience, not to solve problems." Tony's jaw clenched. "You don't..." "And you," Batman turned to Steve, "are operating from loyalty to a friend. Noble, but it's blinding you to legitimate concerns about accountability. The Accords are overreach, but the principles behind them aren't wrong." "So what? You're saying we should just..." Hawkeye began. "I'm saying both sides need to stop, breathe, and think," Batman interrupted. "Work together to find the real enemy, because I guarantee whoever bombed Vienna is watching this right now, hoping you tear each other apart." For a moment, one crystalline moment, it seemed like reason might prevail. Tony looked at Steve. Steve looked at Tony. Old friendship flickered beneath the conflict, the memory of fighting side by side against impossible odds. Then Spider-Man's head jerked to the side. Guys, we've got incoming. Big incoming." A Quinjet screamed overhead, military markings visible on its hull. Secretary Ross's voice boomed through speakers. "Captain Rogers, you are ordered to surrender immediately. Failure to comply will result in lethal force authorization." "Lethal force," Spider-Man squeaked. "But we're heroes. They can't just..." "They can," Black Widow said grimly. "The Accords give them that authority against unregistered combatants." Steve's expression hardened. "We're not surrendering, and we're not fighting you. We're leaving. That Quinjet is our only chance to find who really did this." "Over my dead body," Black Panther snarled, his claws extending. "That can be arranged," Bucky replied coldly, decades of Winter Soldier programming flickering behind his eyes despite his attempts to suppress it. Batman saw the moment collapse, saw the last possibility of peace evaporate like morning dew, saw both sides making the choice to fight because talking had failed. "Tony, don't do this," he said urgently. "I don't have a choice," Tony replied, and he actually sounded sorry. "Jarvis, combat protocols, non-lethal force only. Try to minimize casualties." "Steve, please," Batman tried one last time. "I'm sorry," Steve said, and he sounded like he meant it. "But some things are worth fighting for, even against friends." The first repulsor blast screamed across the tarmac. Captain America's shield came up, deflecting the beam into the concrete, where it exploded in a shower of debris. Scarlet Witch's hands blazed with crimson energy as she caught a missile war machine fired, redirecting it into empty sky. Black Panther lunged forward with inhuman speed, claws aimed for Bucky's throat. Falcon took to the air, banking hard as Spider-Man swung after him on synthetic webbing. And Batman stood in the center of the chaos, watching the Avengers destroy each other, knowing with absolute certainty that somewhere the real enemy was smiling. He had seconds to choose: join one side, join the other, or do what he did best: operate in the shadows and find the truth no one else was looking for. His choice was never in doubt. While gods and soldiers clashed, while friends became enemies and the world watched heroes fall, the Dark Knight would do what he always did: hunt the real monster. Find the pattern in the chaos, expose the manipulation. A batarang flew from his hand, not aimed at any combatant, but at a security camera 30 yards away. One of the few recording devices pointed at the battle. The camera sparked and died, its feed cut. Because if someone was watching this, if someone wanted the Avengers fighting, then Batman was going to make sure they didn't enjoy the show. He was going to find them. He was going to stop them. And he was going to prove that sometimes the greatest heroism isn't choosing a side, it's refusing to fight the wrong battle. The airport erupted into spectacular combat: repulsor beams, shield ricochets, arrows, webs, energy blasts, sonic attacks, and superhuman strength colliding in a display that would have been magnificent if it wasn't so tragic. Heroes who had saved the world together now fought with desperate intensity, each convinced their cause was just. Batman moved through the chaos like a shadow, analyzing, recording, searching for the pattern that would reveal the puppet master pulling these strings. He would find them, no matter how long it took, because that's what he did. That's who he was. And in a world that had forgotten the difference between justice and vengeance, someone needed to remember. The battle at Leipzig-Halle Airport was unlike anything Bruce had witnessed, even during Justice League conflicts. These weren't just enhanced individuals. They were a symphony of powers and technologies working in devastating coordination, years of combat experience evident in every move, despite fighting former allies. Spider-Man swung between cargo containers, webbing catching Falcon's wings and sending him spiraling into a controlled crash. Sorry," the kid yelled, his voice cracking with teenage anxiety. "I'm really sorry. You seem like a really nice guy, and I feel terrible about this." "Then stop doing it," Falcon shouted back, deploying Red Wing, a drone that fired stunning projectiles at the young hero. War machines strafed overhead, sonic cannons creating pressure waves that staggered Ant-Man, who suddenly expanded to the size of a car. "Okay, that's new," Rhodey muttered, recalibrating his targeting systems. Scarlet Witch's energy blasts collided with Vision's forehead beam in midair, the resulting explosion of reality-warping power and Mind Stone energy, creating a shockwave that shattered windows across the terminal. The synthetic being and the enhanced woman circled each other, former allies now adversaries, and the grief on both their faces was palpable. Black Panther moved like liquid death, vibranium claws seeking Bucky's throat with single-minded determination. The Winter Soldier fought defensively, decades of training keeping him alive but barely. "I didn't kill your father," Bucky shouted, desperation in his voice. "Liar!" T'Challa roared, grief transforming into rage that made him reckless. Captain America's shield rang like a bell as it deflected repulsor blasts, ricocheting between Iron Man and War Machine with mathematical precision. Steve fought with the grim efficiency of a man who'd seen too many wars, each movement economic and devastating. "Tony, please! We're playing into someone's hands!" "The only thing I'm playing into is reality," Tony fired back, repulsors tracking Steve's movements. "You chose this, Cap." Batman moved through the chaos like a ghost, using the distraction to access secure areas of the airport. His cowl systems had identified the security hub, a hardened facility where all surveillance data was stored and transmitted. If someone had manipulated the Vienna footage, evidence would exist in the digital infrastructure. He scaled the exterior wall of the security building using his grapnel gun, magnetic grips finding purchase on the steel and concrete. Explosive gel made quick work of a reinforced window, the shaped charge creating an entry point without alerting internal sensors. Years of breaking into places he wasn't supposed to be had taught Bruce how to move through security systems like water through cracks. The security hub's main server room hummed with electronic activity, dozens of workstations monitoring feeds from across the airport and broader German intelligence networks. Batman's fingers flew across the nearest terminal, his cowl's AI interface, rudimentary compared to Jarvis but effective, cracking encryption protocols. Outside, the battle intensified. Ant-Man expanded to enormous size, 50 feet tall, a giant among heroes, grabbing War Machine from the sky with hands large enough to palm aircraft. "I'm sorry," Scott Lang shouted in a voice that shook the ground. "This is really weird for me too." Spider-Man webbed Giant Man's legs together, the synthetic strands holding despite the immense strain. "Holy, Mr. Stark, did you see that? He just got huge. That's insane. How does the square cube law even—" "Kid, focus," Tony barked, his suit's repulsors firing at maximum output to destabilize the giant. Batman found what he was looking for, the Vienna bombing's digital forensics, the security footage everyone had seen, the evidence that had convinced the world Bucky Barnes was guilty. But underneath the surface-level data, his detective instincts found inconsistencies. The timestamp on the bombing footage had been altered, fractionally, expertly, but altered nonetheless. The camera's maintenance records showed unauthorized access from an external source 3 hours before the explosion, exactly as he'd suspected. And the bomb's chemical signature, when cross-referenced with international munitions databases, matched explosives from a black market dealer with ties to multiple intelligence agencies. Someone with considerable resources and technical sophistication had orchestrated this. Someone who understood both digital forensics and explosive ordnance. Someone who wanted the Avengers divided badly enough to commit mass murder and frame a former assassin. But who? Batman's search expanded, pulling data not just from the Vienna incident, but from the entire sequence of events that led to this moment. The Sokovia Accords drafting, the political pressure that accelerated their passage, the media narratives that turned public opinion against unregulated heroes. Every thread connected, forming a web of manipulation that stretched back months. A name appeared in the data streams, buried in encrypted communications and financial transactions. Helmut Zemo, former Sokovian intelligence officer. Family killed during Ultron's attack. Last known location, unknown. Bruce's blood ran cold. This wasn't just about dividing the Avengers. This was revenge. Personal, calculated revenge from someone who'd lost everything and blamed the heroes for it. Outside, Giant Man collapsed, shrinking back to normal size as Ant-Man's suit overloaded. Spider-Man caught him before he hit the ground, webbing creating a safety net. "Got you. Are you okay?" You need to breathe. Just breathe. Captain America charged Iron Man directly, shield raised. Tony's suit deployed additional armor plating, Mark 46's advanced systems compensating for Steve's enhanced strength. They collided with devastating force, the impact creating a crater in the tarmac. Two men who'd once trusted each other completely, now fighting with everything they had. "Why are you doing this?" Steve demanded, his voice breaking through the combat. "Since when did Tony Stark ask permission from anyone?" "Since I realized that just because I can doesn't mean I should," Tony roared back, repulsors firing at point-blank range. Steve's shield absorbed the energy, redirecting it into the ground. "Since I learned that sometimes the smartest guy in the room is still wrong." "You're wrong now," Steve insisted, pressing forward. "About Bucky, about the Accords, about all of it." Batman uploaded the evidence he'd found to his cowl systems, preparing to transmit it to both teams. This battle needed to end. The real enemy was still out there, and every second spent fighting was. Alarms shrieked through the security hub. Red emergency lights bathed the room in crimson. Batman's cowl immediately identified the problem. Someone had triggered a building-wide security lockdown. Reinforced doors slammed shut. Electromagnetic pulses deactivated electronic locks, and in the confusion, the server he'd been accessing began wiping itself, a dead man's switch activated by his intrusion. He had seconds before the evidence disappeared forever. Batman's gauntlets deployed electromagnetic dampeners, fighting the wipe protocol with every tool in his considerable arsenal. Lines of code scrolled across his vision as he battled against whoever had anticipated this exact scenario. Zemo, it had to be Zemo, had predicted someone might investigate, had left traps for anyone who got too close. The wipe protocol was winning. 50% of the data gone. 60%. 70. "No," Batman growled, ripping the physical server from its housing and shielding it with his cape's lead lining to prevent remote detonation. If he couldn't stop the wipe digitally, he'd preserve the hardware and analyze it later. 85% gone. 90. He'd saved fragments, pieces of the puzzle. Not enough to prove everything, but enough to show reasonable doubt, enough to make them question what they'd been told. The security hub's doors exploded inward. War machines stood in the smoke, every weapon system trained on Batman. "Step away from the server, hands where I can see them." "Colonel Rhodes," Batman said calmly, raising his hands slowly. "I'm not your enemy." "Yeah, that's what they all say right before. Hold on." Rhodey's heads-up display flickered with incoming data. "What is this? What did you just—" Batman had transmitted the fragmentary evidence directly to War Machine systems. "Let him see the inconsistencies. Let him understand." "It's proof that your team is fighting the wrong battle," Batman said. The Vienna bombing was a setup. Bucky Barnes was framed by a Sokovian named Helmut Zemo, whose family died in the Ultron attack. He wants the Avengers destroyed, and you're helping him accomplish that. Rhodey's helmet retracted, revealing a face lined with conflict. This evidence is incomplete, fragmentary, could be falsified. "It's not," Batman insisted, "and you know it. Your instincts are telling you something's wrong with this entire situation. Listen to them." Outside, the battle reached a crescendo. Black Panther had Bucky pinned, claws at his throat. Scarlet Witch and Vision's power clash was creating reality distortions that warped the air itself. Captain America and Iron Man traded blows that would have killed normal humans, years of friendship shattering with each impact. War Machine stared at the data, his tactical mind processing what it meant. "If you're right, if this Zemo person orchestrated everything, then Steve and I are both wrong," Batman finished. "Both manipulated. Both so convinced of your righteousness that you couldn't see the truth. He lowered his hands carefully. Help me stop this. Before they kill each other. For a long moment, Colonel James Rhodes stood at the crossroads of duty and doubt. Then he made his choice. Jarvis, open a channel to all combatants, Rhodey commanded. Priority override. Channel open, Colonel. All units, cease fire. War Machine's voice boomed across the battlefield. Repeat, all units cease fire immediately. We have new intelligence suggesting... The explosion came from nowhere and everywhere simultaneously. A massive detonation in the terminal building, timed perfectly to create maximum chaos. The shockwave sent heroes flying, momentarily stunning even enhanced individuals. Batman's tactical assessment screamed warnings. This was another setup, another manipulation. Zemo had anticipated someone might uncover his plan and prepared contingencies. The explosion would be blamed on the conflict, on unregulated heroes causing collateral damage, further justifying the Accords. Through the smoke and debris, Batman saw a figure moving with purpose toward the Quinjet hangar, not Captain America's team, but someone else. Someone who'd been hidden in the chaos, waiting for this exact moment. The real enemy, finally showing himself. There, Batman pointed, already moving. That's Zemo. But the explosion had done its damage in more ways than one. War Machine's suit had been caught in the blast, systems damaged. Half the heroes were disoriented, and in the confusion, Captain America's team made their desperate play for escape. The Quinjet engines roared to life. Steve, Bucky, and Sam fought their way toward it, using the chaos as cover. Black Panther pursued, rage overriding reason. Tony recovered from the blast and launched skyward, determined to stop them. And Batman faced a choice that would define everything that followed. Pursue Zemo, who was escaping in the opposite direction, or try to stop the hero-on-hero violence that was about to escalate into something unforgivable. The detective in him knew the right answer. Catch the villain, expose the truth. Let the heroes sort themselves out once they understood the manipulation. But the human in him, the part of Bruce Wayne that had watched his parents die in Crime Alley, that knew the cost of heroes failing to work together, couldn't let them destroy each other. He chose the heroes. Batman's grapnel fired, the line wrapping around Iron Man's leg as Tony pursued the Quinjet. The sudden drag threw off Tony's trajectory, sending him into a controlled crash. "What are you? Get off!" Tony roared, repulsors charging. "Stop!" Batman commanded. "This is what he wants. He's escaping while you fight each other." But it was too late. The Quinjet was airborne, Captain America's team escaping into German airspace. Black Panther managed to board at the last second, continuing his hunt for Bucky. And Tony Stark, seeing his final chance to resolve this peacefully disappearing into the sky, made a choice that would haunt him. "Vision, take them down," Tony ordered coldly. "Non-lethal, but take them down." The Mind Stone blazed. Vision's beam lanced toward the Quinjet, calculated to disable engines without killing the occupants. But Scarlet Witch, seeing the attack, reacted instinctively to protect her teammates. Her reality-warping powers collided with the beam, redirecting it away from the aircraft, directly into War Machine's arc reactor. Rhodey's suit sparked, died, and fell. 50,000 feet, terminal velocity, a friend plummeting to his death because heroes couldn't stop fighting long enough to see they were all being played. Sam Wilson dove after him, Falcon's wings screaming as he chased the falling War Machine. But even enhanced aerial abilities had limits. He wasn't fast enough. Tony caught Rhodey 300 feet from impact, repulsors burning at maximum output to arrest the fall. They hit the ground hard but survivably, Tony's armor absorbing most of the damage. "Rhodey! Rhodey! Talk to me." Tony's voice cracked with raw terror. "Jarvis, medical scan." "Colonel Rhodes is alive but critically injured. Spinal trauma detected. Immediate medical attention required." The airport fell silent. Heroes on both sides stared at the crumpled form of War Machine in Iron Man's arms, the terrible cost of their conflict made devastatingly real. Batman stood among them, watching the Quinjet disappear into the distance, watching Zemo's escape vehicle vanish in the opposite direction, watching everything fall apart because good people had been manipulated into becoming enemies. He'd tried to stop it. He'd found evidence, exposed manipulation, done everything he could. It hadn't been enough. And now a hero, a good man, a soldier, a friend, lay broken because Batman had made the wrong choice. Because he'd tried to save heroes instead of stopping villains. The lesson was brutal and clear. In this universe, like his own, sometimes you couldn't save everyone. Sometimes the darkness won. The aftermath of Leipzig was a study in shattered alliances and bitter consequences. War Machine had been evacuated to a Berlin trauma center, his injuries severe enough that even Tony Stark's technology couldn't immediately fix the damage. Partial paralysis, spinal fractures, the kind of wounds that ended careers and changed lives forever. Batman watched from the shadows of the medical facility's roof as emergency vehicles arrived and departed, their lights painting the night in reds and blues. Below, Tony Stark sat in a waiting room designed for families of the critically injured, his arc reactor's glow visible through the window, head in his hands like a man carrying the weight of impossible choices. The airport had been secured by German authorities. Team Captain America had escaped, their Quinjet disappearing into Eastern European airspace. Black Panther had gone with them, driven by vengeance. The remaining heroes, Spider-Man, Black Widow, Vision, had dispersed, each processing the disaster in their own way. And Helmut Zemo, the architect of it all, remained free. Bruce's cowl systems had tracked the vehicle Zemo used to flee the airport, but the trail went cold at a private airfield 30 kilometers away. The man had resources, planning, and most importantly, a head start. Finding him would require investigation, time, and access to intelligence networks. You going to lurk up there all night, or are you going to be useful? Batman turned to find Black Widow standing on the roof access door, having ascended with such stealth that even his enhanced awareness had barely registered her approach. Natasha Romanoff studied him with eyes that had seen too much, survived too much, and trusted nothing. "I'm analyzing the situation," Batman replied. "The situation is FUBAR," Natasha said flatly, moving to stand beside him at the roof's edge. "War Machine is paralyzed. The Avengers are fractured beyond repair. Steve Rogers is a fugitive, and you showed up with evidence that might have prevented all of it. Evidence that's now mostly destroyed." "Not destroyed," Batman corrected. "I preserved the physical server. The data can be recovered with proper forensic analysis." "Great. And how long will that take? Days? Weeks?" Natasha's voice carried bitter pragmatism. "Meanwhile, Zemo is in the wind. Steve is chasing ghosts. And Tony is sitting in a hospital room watching his best friend's medical readouts and blaming himself for everything." Batman said nothing. What could he say? She was right. He'd found the truth too late, acted too slowly, made the wrong tactical choice at the critical moment. In Gotham, he operated with complete knowledge of the city's systems, its criminals, its infrastructure. Here, he was operating blind, and it showed. "You remind me of someone," Natasha observed, her tone shifting slightly. "Same grim determination, same certainty that you can fix everything if you're just smart enough, fast enough, dark enough." She glanced at him. "Steve was like that once. Before the world taught him that sometimes, no matter how hard you fight, you still lose. "I haven't lost yet," Batman said quietly. "Haven't you?" Natasha challenged. "You came here talking about manipulation and hidden enemies, and all you've accomplished is watching heroes destroy each other. That sounds like losing to me." The words stung because they were true. Bruce had encountered scenarios like this in Gotham, criminals who specialized in turning allies against each other, who understood that sometimes the greatest weapon against heroes was their own nobility. He'd stopped those plans through investigation, patience, and careful manipulation of his own. But this wasn't Gotham. These weren't criminals he'd studied for years. This was an entire universe of heroes operating under different rules, with different histories, and he'd been arrogant enough to think he could solve their problems in hours. "Tell me about Zemo," Batman said, shifting the conversation to productive ground. "The intelligence files were limited. I need complete operational history." Natasha considered whether to share classified information with a dimensional anomaly, then apparently decided the situation was desperate enough to warrant it. "Helmut Zemo, Sokovian intelligence officer, Eco-Scorpion Special Forces. Wife and son killed when Sokovia was destroyed during the Ultron incident. Dropped off the grid immediately after, and we assumed he was dead or in hiding like thousands of other refugees." "But he wasn't hiding," Batman said. "He was planning. Apparently." Natasha pulled up a holographic display from her wrist unit, showing Zemo's military record. "Expert in infiltration, psychological operations, demolitions. Not enhanced, but extremely dangerous. And smart enough to manipulate the Avengers into tearing themselves apart." Batman studied the tactical profile with professional appreciation. Zemo was exactly the kind of enemy Bruce respected most. No superpowers, just human intelligence, weaponized through training and trauma. The kind of adversary who understood that the greatest heroes could be defeated by making them defeat themselves. "He's not finished," Batman observed. "Vienna was just the opening move. The airport was confirmation of success. But a man this methodical, this patient, doesn't stop until the job is complete." "Complete how?" Natasha asked. "The Avengers are already destroyed." "No," Batman corrected. "Divided, but not destroyed. As long as the core members are alive, they can rebuild. Zemo knows that." "Which means his endgame involves eliminating the possibility of reconciliation." Natasha's expression hardened as she understood the implication. He's going after Steve and Tony directly, making sure they can never work together again. "Or making sure one of them kills the other," Batman said grimly. "Where would Captain Rogers go? If he's investigating Bucky's innocence, following Zemo's trail, where does that lead?" "Siberia," Natasha said immediately. "That's where the Winter Soldier program operated. If Zemo wanted to plant evidence, reveal secrets, or set a final trap, that's where he'd do it. Remote, isolated, full of Cold War horrors that would..." She stopped, realization dawning. "That's where the other Winter Soldiers are kept in cryo storage. Super soldiers as dangerous as Bucky, maybe more. If someone woke them up, or if someone wanted Steve and Tony to think they were waking them up," Batman finished. "Create a scenario where both men arrive at the same location, already primed to distrust each other, in a facility full of enhanced assassins. Emotional triggers everywhere. Add whatever revelation Zemo's been saving. It's an execution chamber disguised as a rescue mission," Natasha said quietly. "And they're both walking into it." Batman's mind raced through tactical scenarios. Siberia was thousands of miles away. Captain America had a Quinjet, fast but not instantaneous. Tony Stark would follow once he learned where Steve was heading, driven by guilt over Rhodey and determination to end this. They'd arrive within hours of each other, in a location chosen specifically because it contained maximum psychological trauma. Zemo would be waiting, with revelations, with proof, with whatever truth he'd been saving for the moment when it would cause maximum damage. "We need to stop them," Batman said. "We?" Natasha raised an eyebrow. "Last I checked, you're not an Avenger. You're not even from this universe. Why do you care if Tony and Steve kill each other?" Batman turned to face her fully, and for a moment, the Dark Knight's mask slipped, revealing the man beneath. Bruce Wayne, who'd watched his parents murdered in an alley, who dedicated his life to ensuring no one else suffered that loss, who understood better than anyone what happened when heroes failed. "Because I've seen what happens when good people destroy each other over lies," he said quietly. "I've watched friendships end in blood, watched allies become enemies, watched the people who should be fighting evil waste their strength fighting each other instead." His voice carried decades of painful experience. "And I swore I'd never let that happen again, if I could prevent it." Natasha studied him for a long moment, and something in her expression softened fractionally. "You're not going to prevent it. Not this time. Zemo's plan is too advanced, the damage too deep. Best case scenario, you arrive in time to watch the ending." "Then I'll arrive in time to change the ending," Batman said with absolute certainty. "With what? You've got no Quinjet, no support, no resources in this universe. You're one man with fancy gadgets, and impressive as those gadgets are, they won't get you to Siberia in time to matter." Batman had already considered this problem. His usual resources, the Batplane, Justice League teleporters, Wayne Enterprises' global infrastructure, didn't exist here. He was operating with whatever he could acquire, steal, or improvise in an unfamiliar universe. But Bruce Wayne had built an empire from nothing before, had created the Batman identity from trauma and determination, had learned long ago that limitations were just challenges waiting for creative solutions. "There's always a way," he said simply. Natasha almost smiled, not with humor, but with recognition of a kindred spirit who refused to accept defeat. "You really are like Steve. Same stubborn refusal to acknowledge reality." She made a decision, pulling up coordinates on her display. "Siberian Hydra Facility, 47 degrees north, 78 degrees east. Steve will arrive there in approximately 4 hours. Tony will follow maybe 30 minutes later once I give him the location." "You're helping them kill each other?" Batman asked sharply. "I'm helping them finish this," Natasha corrected. "One way or another, this ends in Siberia. Whether that ending is bloody or bloodless." She met his eyes. "That depends on whether you're as good as you think you are." She moved toward the roof access, then paused. "There's a SHIELD safe house 2 blocks north. Experimental aircraft in the underground hangar. Something Fury was developing before everything went sideways, fast enough to get you to Siberia. Security codes are..." She rattled off a sequence of numbers. "Consider it a professional courtesy. One spy to another." "I'm not a spy," Batman said. "No," Natasha agreed. "You're something worse. You're an idealist who thinks detective work and tactical superiority can solve everything. That makes you more dangerous than any spy." She opened the access door. "Good luck, Batman. You're going to need it. Because what Zemo has waiting in Siberia, that's not something you can punch your way through." She disappeared into the stairwell, leaving Batman alone on the roof with coordinates, stolen access codes, and a ticking clock counting down to catastrophe. 4 hours to reach Siberia. 4 hours to understand whatever trap Zemo had prepared. 4 hours to find a way to stop 2 of the world's greatest heroes from destroying each other. Batman's grapnel fired, the line carrying him into Berlin's night. The SHIELD safe house was easy to locate, underground facility disguised as an abandoned warehouse. security systems sophisticated but predictable to someone who'd spent years breaking into government installations. The experimental aircraft was impressive, a hybrid design combining Quinjet technology with something more exotic, possibly reverse-engineered from alien tech recovered during the New York invasion. Fast, stealthy, with vertical takeoff capability and atmospheric re-entry shielding. Exactly what he needed. Bruce's fingers flew across the control systems, bypassing security protocols and initializing flight systems. His cowl's AI interfaced with the aircraft's computer, creating a functional, if imperfect, connection. Not as smooth as the Batplane, but operational. The engines hummed to life with a sound like controlled thunder. Somewhere ahead, in a frozen wasteland at the edge of the world, a trap was waiting. A man consumed by grief and rage had spent months preparing a scenario designed to break the Avengers permanently. Psychological warfare refined to deadly perfection. And Batman was flying toward it with incomplete information, limited resources, and the absolute certainty that if he failed, good people would die. Or worse, good people would become killers. The aircraft lifted off, Berlin falling away beneath him as he accelerated toward Siberia. Toward the final confrontation. Toward whatever truth Zemo had been saving for this moment. Bruce Wayne had faced impossible odds before, had stood against gods and monsters, had survived when survival seemed impossible. But this felt different, more personal. Because these weren't villains he was racing to stop. They were heroes, people trying their best to do right in an impossible situation. People being manipulated into destroying everything they stood for. He knew how that felt, had lived that nightmare, had watched his own crusade nearly consume him. If he could save these heroes from that fate, if he could prevent them from crossing lines they'd never forgive themselves for crossing, then maybe everything that brought him to this universe would be justified. Autopilot engaged, the aircraft's computer announced. Estimated time to destination, 3 hours, 47 minutes. Batman settled into the pilot's seat, his mind already racing through scenarios, planning contingencies, preparing for every possible configuration of Zemo's trap. Behind him, Berlin's lights faded into darkness. Ahead, the frozen wastes of Siberia waited with secrets that would test everything he believed about heroism, justice, and the cost of doing what's right. The endgame was beginning, and the Dark Knight was running out of time. The Siberian wasteland stretched endlessly below, a white desert of snow and ice broken only by jagged mountain ranges and the occasional Soviet-era structure slowly being reclaimed by the frozen earth. Batman's stolen aircraft cut through the frigid air at supersonic speed, the landscape blurring beneath him as he approached coordinates that promised answers and horrors in equal measure. 3 hours of flight had given him time to analyze what little information existed about the Hydra facility. Built during the Cold War, it had been one of several black sites where the Winter Soldier program conducted its darkest experiments. Creating super soldiers, perfecting brainwashing techniques, storing human weapons in cryogenic suspension until they were needed. The files Natasha had transmitted were fragmentary, heavily redacted, but they painted a picture of systematic horror. Men and women transformed into living weapons, their personalities erased, their skills honed to lethal perfection. Bucky Barnes had been the program's crown jewel, but he hadn't been the only success. 5 other Winter Soldiers existed, each potentially as dangerous as Bucky, frozen in time for decades. If someone woke them, if someone deployed 5 enhanced assassins simultaneously, the carnage would be catastrophic. But Batman's detective instincts screamed that wasn't Zemo's plan. The man was too methodical, too focused. He didn't want to rule or conquer. He wanted revenge. Specific, personal revenge against the Avengers who destroyed his family. Which meant the Winter Soldiers were either bait or a distraction. The real trap was psychological. Approaching target coordinates, the aircraft's computer announced. Multiple heat signatures detected at facility. 2 aircraft already on site, 1 Quinjet, 1 Iron Man armor. Multiple biological readings inside structure. Batman's jaw tightened. Both sides had already arrived. Captain America and Iron Man were in the facility together, with Zemo somewhere in the mix. The confrontation was already underway. He was too late to prevent the meeting. But maybe not too late to prevent tragedy. The aircraft descended rapidly, vertical thrusters engaging to slow the approach. Batman didn't bother with the concealed hangar entrance. Subtlety was a luxury he couldn't afford. He landed in the snow-covered courtyard, the impact sending up a plume of white powder, and was moving before the engines fully powered down. The facility entrance gaped like a mouth leading into frozen darkness. Soviet architecture, brutalist and functional, designed to withstand both weather and assault. Batman's thermal vision picked up residual heat signatures people had entered recently, descending into the depths. He followed. The corridors were ice cold, despite internal heating systems that struggled against Siberian temperatures. Emergency lighting cast everything in sickly yellow, creating shadows that moved when he did. His footsteps were silent, despite the urgency driving him forward, decades of training ensuring stealth even in crisis. Voices echoed from deeper in the complex, raised voices, angry voices. Batman increased his pace, following the sound through maze-like corridors until he reached a massive vault door that had been blown open, recently given the scorch marks. Beyond lay a chamber that made his blood run cold. Cryogenic pods lined the walls, each containing a frozen human form. But the pods had been destroyed, not opened, destroyed. Bullets had shattered the reinforced glass, penetrating the frozen bodies within. 5 Winter Soldiers, dead in their sleep, murdered before they could become threats. In the center of the chamber, 3 men faced each other in a tableau of barely restrained violence. Captain America, Steve Rogers, stood with his shield raised, vibranium circle dented from recent combat. His uniform was torn, blood trickling from a cut above his eye, and his expression carried the weight of terrible revelation. Iron Man, Tony Stark, floated a foot off the ground, every weapon system deployed, repulsors charged and aimed at Steve. The faceplate was retracted, revealing a face twisted with rage so profound it had transcended reason into something primal and destructive. And between them, projected on a deteriorating screen, footage played on a loop. Grainy, black and white, dated December 16th, 1991. A car crash, 2 people struggling. And Bucky Barnes, the Winter Soldier, face emotionless, following programming, executing them both with mechanical efficiency. Howard and Maria Stark, Tony's parents, murdered. Batman understood everything in an instant. This was Zemo's endgame. Not the Winter Soldiers. They'd been props, bait to draw both men here. The real weapon was truth. Devastating, unforgivable truth that transformed justified anger into something that could never be reconciled. You knew. Tony's voice was hollow, destroyed. Steve, you knew he killed them, and you didn't tell me. Tony, Steve's voice cracked with guilt and desperate need to explain. I found out after. It wasn't Bucky. It was the programming, the brainwashing. I don't care, Tony screamed, and the sound echoed through the frozen chamber like a death knell. He killed them. Your friend, your precious Bucky, murdered my parents, and you protected him. You looked me in the eye and lied. I was trying to protect you from what? The truth. Tony's repulsors charged to maximum. I asked you once if you knew, and you said no, You lied to my face to protect the man who murdered my family." Batman stepped forward, emerging from the shadows. "Stark, Rogers, stand down, both of you." 3 pairs of eyes snapped to him. Tony's scan systems immediately identified the dimensional anomaly from Berlin. Steve's tactical assessment recognized someone else who'd been trying to stop this disaster. And from a surveillance booth visible through reinforced glass, Helmut Zemo watched with the satisfaction of a man whose plan had worked perfectly. "This isn't the time for mysterious vigilantes," Tony said, his voice dangerous. "Walk away, Bat whatever. This is between me and the man who's been lying to me." "This is exactly what Zemo wants," Batman insisted, gesturing toward the observation booth where the Sokovian watched. "He orchestrated everything, Vienna, the evidence, drawing you both here, to make you destroy each other. Every choice you've made since the bombing has been his choice. Every move, his move. You're dancing to his tune." "I don't care about Zemo right now," Tony shouted. "I care about the fact that Steve Rogers, Captain America, the man who lectures everyone about honesty and doing the right thing, knew that his brainwashed best friend murdered my parents and said nothing." "Because telling you wouldn't have changed anything," Steve shot back, desperation bleeding into anger. "What would you have done, Tony? Arrested Bucky, killed him. He was a prisoner, a weapon. He had no choice." "Neither did my parents," Tony's voice broke. "They begged. I watched them beg, and your friend put a bullet in my father's head while my mother watched, then crushed her throat with his metal arm. That's what your precious Bucky did. That's who you've been protecting." The footage continued to loop on the screen, each iteration driving the knife deeper. Batman recognized Zemo's psychological warfare. This wasn't just about revealing truth. It was about making that truth inescapable, forcing both men to relive it until reason drowned in emotion. "Turn it off," Batman commanded, moving toward the projection system. "Don't," Tony warned, repulsors tracking Batman's movement. "Don't you dare." "Watching it repeatedly won't change what happened," Batman said, his voice carrying hard-won wisdom from years of reliving his own parents' death. "It will only ensure you make decisions you'll regret for the rest of your life." "I already regret things," Tony said coldly. "I regret trusting Steve. I regret believing the Avengers were anything more than people with power pretending to be heroes."